I call Dr. Paul Hutchison.
Mr. Speaker, it is a great pleasure to have a call on this excellent budget 2014-15, and what a coincidence it is that Annette King has just spoken about figures, because she was the minister that presided over a doubling of the health budget over 9 years, where there was a decrease in productivity and a decrease in surgical operations. Under this government, in just under 5 years, there has been an increase in surgical procedures of 40,000 per year. It's all very well for Mrs. King to talk about more money. Health systems around the world are characterised by almost infinite demand but finite resources. Mrs. King would never have enough money to be able to organise a health system properly, whereas under National, over the last 5 years, we have seen gains, huge gains in productivity, huge tangible gains in immunisation, in surgical procedures, in radiation therapy, which has become world standards, and in public health. But, Mr. Speaker, I just want to say that this budget is a budget worth celebrating, because right around the country we have heard commentators say how excellent it has been. And in the electorate that I represent of Whenua, just about every sector has been totally delighted by the budget, whether it's been the teachers, whether it's been the farmers, whether it's been the business people, whether it's been the doctors and the nurses. Mr. Speaker, the business people of New Zealand have been very pleased by the national government, because they have set a very clear agenda and they have kept to their promises, and one of their major objectives was to achieve a surplus, and that is indeed what they have done. But, Mr. Speaker, it is quite extraordinary that Mr. Parker, the financial spokesperson for the Labour opposition, is suggesting they too would have a surplus. Well, we all know that Mr. Parker and Mr. Cunliffe are prisoners to the Greens and the unions, to the Marxists and the Socialists. They would spend more, they would borrow more, they would tax more, and there is no way on earth that they would achieve a surplus under the current pressures that are facing them. Mr. Speaker, the only way the Greens and Labour would generate a surplus is to bring out Russell Norman's franking machine, the printing money machine, and away they would go. He was the champion of quantitative easing, and what a shambles that would be, Mr. Speaker. Now, it is a curious coincidence of biology that we've just learned that a little creature called the Tasmanian devil has become an endangered species. But if one really thinks about the Tasmanian devil, Mr. Speaker, it would cause absolute chaos if it was let loose in New Zealand. And in fact, I did get a description of it. Its spine-chilling screeches, black colour and reputed bad temper led the early European settlers to call this creature the devil. But, Mr. Speaker, really, the Greens and Labour are a huge danger to the financial stability and sustainability of New Zealand, and I'm glad to report that the good people of Whenua absolutely recognise that fact. Mr. Speaker, the doctors and the nurses around New Zealand are very much welcoming this budget. Free access, or taxpayer funders access, there's no such thing as free access for children, is the best way to get early treatment and avoid hospitalisation. And we have people like Dr. Nikki Turner from the Child Poverty Action Group, who's also head of the National Immunisation Research Centre, who has been campaigning for this for years. And she's delighted that the national government has delivered. We've got people like Professor Innes Asher, a very distinguished academic from the Starship, who has written many papers on the fact that if children can be treated early for skin infections, they can afford often life-saving treatment that goes on for months for very, very serious skin infections. This is a win-win. This is a win for the children and a win for the scarce health dollar. Mr. Speaker, the farmers in Hanua have welcomed this budget, and they've welcomed it because the taxation base is broad and reasonably low. Hopefully it may go down even less. But the clear signal is reward for effort. Inflation is 1.6%, economic growth is destined to rise above 3.5%, and interest rates remain relatively low. But, Mr. Speaker, there's significant investment going into innovation and science in the agricultural sector, and furthermore an investment of $40 million more into irrigation and water storage. And I must say, up in the area that I live in Hanua, the drought this year has been worse than the drought last year, and yet we have the Labour Party and the Greens opposed to more irrigation, opposed to water storage, at a time when it is absolutely crucial for the backbone of our economy, the farmers, the horticulturalists, to ensure that they do have access to water. And, Mr. Speaker, the teachers in Hanua are also extremely pleased because they have seen an investment of a further $858 million over 4 years, making a total of $10.1 billion in early childhood, primary and secondary education. And, Mr. Speaker, indeed, there will always be people wanting more, like Annette King. But of particular interest to me is, and I would say the Health Select Committee, is taking an investment approach in the very early years to allow children the maximum chance to achieve their full potential, but expect them as adults to exercise individual responsibility. It was great to hear a further $155 million for early childhood education, which brings the total in New Zealand to $1.5 billion on early childhood education, something we would never have dreamed of 10 years ago, but which will allow something like 98% of all children to be able to receive that ECE. Mr. Speaker, there's no doubt that very early investment pays off, and the Health Select Committee has indeed shown that in its latest inquiry, and has been backed up by international experts such as Nobel Prize-winning Professor Robert Heckman, who has shown beyond doubt that front-loading pays off hugely compared with investment later on in life. And there's no doubt that this national government, having put in the Children's Action Plan, the Vulnerable Children's Bill, the newborn legislation, are all part of the investment approach. The $500 million package for families and children is far superior to the scattergun, undirected $500 million announcement that Mr. Cunliffe made at the beginning of the year. Much of that would have been wasted. Personally, Mr. Speaker, I would challenge any government anywhere in the world to keep focusing on the investment approach in the very early years, whether that be gold standard services and reproductive health and education and maternity and postnatal, and in the areas of nutrition. And there was another great announcement by the Finance Minister that the Healthy New Zealand package to concentrate on exercise and good nutrition will be rolled out around New Zealand. Mr. Speaker, this budget 2014-15 can only be described as a little beaut.
I call Juror Flavel.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. Kia ora tātou e te whare. Mr. Speaker, these are historic times to be speaking in the